Okay, we are live. Yes. Keep your friends close and your water closer. We're in the dead of summer. We're here to talk some Errol Spence Jr., Terrence Crawford. It's happening. I hope you guys are as ready as I am. It's been a long journey. There were several twists and turns and just frustrating matchups along the way where it's like another fight gets announced and you're just like, oh my God, is this thing ever going to happen? Well, we're a couple days away right now. And, it's funny because, the boxing world is so invested in this fight. Now, let's address the elephant in the room right now. We're coming off the heels of like a huge, spectacular performance by the monster Naoya Inoue. So let me just take a minute to acknowledge that right now, the boxing world is a little bit shaken up because usually when we see a superstar fighter, we kind of have like an idea of how good they can be. So we kind of impose a ceiling on that fighter. But then when you get performances like we just got from the monster against Stephen Fulton, it forces everybody to kind of readjust that ceiling. So yeah, I'll be completely frank. I should do more like, channel talk and, talk a little bit and kind of update you guys on some of the things that I'm, observing and noticing as this, young channel is growing. But yesterday was like by far the most successful day of this channel's history. And maybe it was a byproduct of the time being that it was a Tokyo fight. And I was able to rattle off the reaction within like an hour, 2 hours of the fight taking place. And so algorithmically, I must have, scratched an itch algorithmically, and it just worked. It just worked in the channel's favor. Just a ton of new subs, and I mean, just the amount of comments and likes and stuff. And I mean, a lot of people are really fired up about the monster Naoya Inoue, and are even mentioning down the road a fight between Gervonta Davis and the monster, which I mean, I would love to see. I think it's a kind of a ridiculous matchup. At least that's how I'm seeing it right now. But hey, once upon a time, Manny Pacquiao versus Oscar De La Hoya to me was a ridiculous matchup. But yeah, hey, what's going on? Benjamin Tucker, sup Swoles? Yeah, what's happening? Y'all ready for the fight? Like, this is kind of, people are kind of comparing this fight and trying to think of what the closest thing to this fight is. Like, when was the last time there was a fight of this magnitude? So obviously Floyd Mayweather versus Manny Pacquiao is the biggest fight, at least commercially, in boxing history. Historically, you'd have to go to, I mean, there are a few fights. I don't want to get all, 1930s, 1940s, 50s, but let's say from the 60s on, it's, Frazier versus Ali 1, Frazier versus Ali 3, There've got to be a couple Tyson fights in there, even though it's hard to really pinpoint what that one is. I know, I mean, I know what the significant ones were. Him versus Spinks. Michael Spinks was a big one. That was a huge unification fight. In more recent memory, let's just say heavyweights aside, non-heavyweight super fights. I mean, you've got Leonard and Tommy Hearns, their first fight when they were both in their 20s. Now, in this fight with Crawford Spence, or should I say Spence-Crawford, even though it's academic at this point. I'm just saying Crawford versus Spence because Crawford is Spence has held dominion at welterweight, and he's got the 3 titles there. Just like we said, Stephen Fulton versus Naoya Inoue, just yesterday morning. But there was, these are fighters who are in their mid-30s. Are they in their physical peaks? Maybe not. Are they in their performance peak? I would argue maybe yes. I have more doubts about where Spence is on his performance trajectory than I do Terrence Crawford. Even though Crawford's a 35-year-old here, I look at welterweight Terrence Crawford as being better than lightweight Terrence Crawford, and probably better than 140 Terrence Crawford. Obviously, now This is just the ultimate test of both fighters. They've had their own roads, and their roads were nothing alike. I mean, we had this whole wrong side of the street thing where Crawford was always on the outside looking in. He was seeing, you know, Danny Garcia, Sean Porter, Keith Thurman, Errol Spence, all these welterweights getting to fight each other because there was this PBC ecosystem. Meanwhile, on Top Rank, they had to be pretty creative on matchmaking for Terrence Crawford. Let's get a over the hill Amir Khan. Let's get hey, Kell Brook, you down? Let's do it. You know, Jose Benavidez Jr. I mean, come on. So, you know, and it's funny because his welterweight debut was an impressive one. Like him fighting Jeff Horn to me was like oh damn, okay, you're going right into, you know, some upper tier-ish welterweights, right? But very different roads. We're here. Hey, Vince, what's going on? QT, thanks for coming through. Yeah. And, okay, so I have concerns. I want to kind of like walk down the different elements of this fight that we could discuss. And then I also want to get your guys' predictions. And I'm going to ask you guys for your predictions, probably maybe about 20 to 30 minutes in. Somewhere along the way, I want to get your guys' opinion on how this fight is going to play out, because it's funny. As split as the public is, I see Vince has Spence KO round 10. As split as the public is on this fight, it's like each person that I'm at least hearing sounds relatively certain that their pick is the right pick. Now, I made my prediction video and I went with Crawford via late stoppage. And, you know, year after year after year, if you were to ask me at any point along the way who would win, Spence-Crawford, I would have always gone Spence, until about, I would say, a year to 2 years ago. Then I started changing, you know, I started having different conversations and thinking about the fight in a different way. And we're going to get into that. We're going to look deeply at this matchup and their particular styles, their vulnerabilities, and so forth. But it seems like whoever somebody is picking, they sound relatively certain that it's going to happen. Now, some people sound more measured. They're like, hey, I don't know who the hell is going to win this. Both of these guys are so good. I'm just happy that I'm seeing this fight. But, you know, gun to my head, where do I go? And then they'll fill in the blank with their pick. The more I started to envision how the fight plays out round over round, just looking at their tendencies, the more I started kind of leaning into some patterns that I noticed and some differences in the opponents that these guys have fought and then the opponent that they will be facing on Saturday, and how jarring some of those technical difficulties will be. And we're going to get into that too. Yeah, Vince, it is a hard pick. Oh, the QT, first live that you caught this year. You know, I was off of the lives for like a few months. Late 2022, I was off the lives, and then I kicked it back into gear somewhat about a month ago, a month and some change. So I'm going to start trying to do these at least once a week going forward. I mean, to be honest, this is like the funnest for me, the funnest experience, being able to talk with you guys in real time. I mean, I try my best to, to respond to the comments, and that's cool. And I enjoy that ecosystem because it's very thoughtful and a lot of interesting exchanges. But right here, I get to hear what you guys are thinking and saying pretty much in real time. So I want to make sure that I keep this going. But like I said, along the way, I was always thinking Spence, until recently Crawford, right? But one thing that somebody asked me the other day, and I really gave it some thought, is this going to be a war or a chess match? And as the thing is, a great matchup on paper doesn't always play out to be an action-packed, memorable fight when it actually takes place. Case in point, De La Hoya Trinidad. I remember I was young, but I was super eager because I had seen Oscar beat Rafael Ruelas, Gennaro Chiquitito Hernandez, and so forth. On Ike Corte, Obakar, on his way to fighting Trinidad, and then the fight takes place, and it's a little bit of it's a technical match. Oscar's kind of having his way. Long story short, it doesn't really meet the moment that you would want a fight of that magnitude to, the way you would want to see it play out, to be one for the ages. A lot of major fights go down like that. Floyd Mayweather versus Manny Pacquiao. I mean, it looked like, okay, it's another Floyd clinic. It didn't look too dissimilar from Floyd Mayweather versus Robert the Ghost Guerrero. But I'm hoping a couple things when it comes to this fight. I hope that it doesn't leave the public wanting, where they see some of the technical aspects of both fighters, and the fighters do have to dig deep, but that they don't have to really lay it out on the line, right? They don't really have to put their necks out there and risk it, right? Risk it in the ring. And they are trying to win rounds. It's hard to envision that style of fight playing out, just given both of these guys' pedigree. All I'm saying is it is possible. I hope that it's not too much like that. And you could probably find more cases where a super fight or near super fight results in that than when the fight actually delivers or exceeds expectations, right? It's kind of hard to really think of the ones that exceeded expectations given the hype. Back in the day, Hearns Hagler, just because that's arguably I can't even say arguably, that probably is the greatest first round of all time of boxing history, at least as far as I've seen. And you might have some where there are more punches thrown, but given the magnitude, given how these guys both met in the center of the ring and just went at it till there was one man standing, and it only took a couple rounds for them to figure out who that man was, stuff like that is remarkable. I think that Oscar De La Hoya versus Sugar Shane Mosley played out and was an exciting fight. It didn't result in a stoppage, and it doesn't have to result in a stoppage, but it was an exciting fight. Triple G versus Canelo, I feel like both of those were really good fights. The second one was really, really good, but then we're going to get into my second concern, what I don't want in Spence-Crawford, and now we're going to relitigate, but just mention Canelo versus Triple G1, a fight that's scorecards, that's disputed decision, changed the course of boxing history if you really think about it. I don't want this fight to result in a disputed decision where people are talking more about either a robbery or talking more about the judges than they are the fighters and the fight. I don't want that. I don't want that for Errol Spence. I don't want that for Terence Crawford. I want there to be a clear winner and a fair winner. That's really all I ask for. I like both of these guys. And to be honest and candid, it's going to be a little hard seeing one of these O's go. You know what I mean? Like, watch, it results in a draw. I don't want that either. But it just, I have so much admiration for both of these guys that, imagine if you see Errol Spence getting, collapsing the pocket one too many times and getting wobbled and dropped. It's like, oh man, this just happened to Spence. Or if you see, Errol Spence start to make Crawford look visibly uncomfortable, where you see Crawford start shifting, all of a sudden he's changing stances more often because he's unable to control the avalanche, the snowball, that is Errol Spence coming downhill, and you start seeing Crawford start to like wince or smile because he's hurt, but he's not able to hurt the other guy like he normally is. And he keeps on getting hurt, and then he starts wilting. Either one of those scenarios is going to be like very dramatic to witness. And it's all possible. I feel like anything is possible in this fight. Let's see. QT, Triple G won, that first Canelo fight. And then, those back-to-back fights, and those decisions did change both fighters' trajectories pretty dramatically. And we would be having a different discussion about Triple G. We would be talking like, is he the greatest middleweight of all time? With Canelo, it's like, yeah, he's still a Hall of Famer. And man, he was really a dog, and he was really brave and valiant for testing how good he could be against Triple G, and, came up just short or something like that. But it wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be the same Canelo career that we've gotten since, because it's almost like the Triple G fights happened, and then the rest is history. Canelo went on and conquered the super middleweight division, minus David Benavidez. But with Spence-Crawford, I want a clear winner. I want a fair winner, and I just want to also encourage everybody to just appreciate this moment, these final days leading up to a fight that we have just been salivating to see. Because if the fight doesn't deliver, you at least want the anticipation to make the anticipation worth it for the sake of the anticipation itself, rather than the anticipation having to be validated by the fight. I get a euphoria when I'm thinking about the fight. You know what I mean? That thinking about the fight can bring me joy. If you could lock into that feeling, I think that is totally worth it. And then the fight, whatever happens in the fight is going to happen in the fight. But so many times in so many months and years, we get fights that we train ourselves to be okay with. We're like, okay, yeah, that's a pretty good one. Oscar Valdez versus Robson Conceição, sure, okay. And we get a lot of fights with fighters that we want to see fight somebody else, but then they fight this other person, and then it's like, oh, okay. And I remember seeing that whole song and dance with Adonis Stevenson and Sergey Kovalev. Adonis Stevenson fighting like Tavoris Cloud. Okay, that's a pretty good fighter. Or, you know, what's his name? Funfara, Andres Funfara again. You know what I mean? Like, let's appreciate that we actually got what we wanted. And in 2023, we've been getting a lot of what we wanted. Like, yes, Teofimo Lopez versus Josh Taylor played out the way that it did, but it was the euphoria and the anticipation leading into it that brought me joy. And then the fight plays out how it plays out. A little anticlimactic. Well, I mean, non-competitive relatively, given what we thought we might see in that fight. All I'm saying is anything is possible in this fight. Let's enjoy the buildup. You know what I mean? And start, rewatching some of the fighters' past fights. So you can, as Jim Lampley would say, relive the moments. You feel me? But also, okay, chess match versus war. Who wants the war and who wants a simmering chess match? I kind of feel like a war is almost the wrong terminology, because if you look at either of these guys' histories, they don't necessarily engage in all-out war. I mean, Terence Crawford has his warlike moments, but he's not Jorge Arce. Y'all remember him? Lighter weight classes, throwing 100 punches around. Think William Zepeda, but smaller. Jorge Arce, super exciting fighter. Went to war like in every fight. Neither of these guys is that. Both of these guys are very, very, very technical. But the way I see it, Errol Spence should want fewer fireworks than Terence Crawford, unless those fireworks are Terence Crawford controlling a simmering pace, a simmering, punch output round by round, to where he's patiently, I like to consider him a patient hunter. He's patiently changing his levels, putting that lead hand out. I'm going to be watching that lead hand, because that is kind of, you could say that his straight left or his left to the body might be his biggest weapon. I think his most important asset is that probing southpaw right hand, right, from the southpaw stance, because he does so much more than just jab with it. He controls the range and distance. He kind of moves your head around a little bit. He'll knock your glove down and do something on top of that, where he knocks the glove down and throws the jab on top of that. So it's a very sophisticated lead hand. It's much more than just a pop jab. It's that and a lot more. So the thing is, when Errol Spence has been able to do that, because in so many Spence fights, whether you're talking about Danny Garcia, Mikey Garcia, obviously, Lamont Peterson, and so forth, the only ones that kind of got out of hand were Sean Porter, where he was forced to fight a Porter fight. Ugas was a little bit rough in those early rounds. I mean, like Richard Dwyer, online boxing analyst, likes to say, knockouts cause amnesia, but those first few rounds were very interesting between Spence and Ugas, and then Kell Brook. Those early rounds were a test for something. It gave Errol Spence a handful and a lot to figure out. But aside from those, he was pretty much able to control the range and the pacing of the fight. And what is so different about this one is that, unlike Danny Garcia, who's got, I don't know, like a 68-inch arm reach, or Mikey Garcia, who's got even shorter arms than that, Terence Crawford has the reach advantage over Errol Spence. So is any punch safe? You get what I'm saying? Like, he's been able to fight a lot of his fights where once he's established control, he's operating under his terms. Terrence Crawford doesn't afford you that ability. And the thing is, he can counter you in so many different creative ways. When you're fighting Spence, you more or less know what the game plan is. And, I was talking with my dad about the fight yesterday. He was saying, yes, you know what the game plan is. And that's good for Spence. And then he explained what he meant and why that is an asset to Spence. And it made sense. But what I'm saying is, I look at it like Errol Spence does not want to get caught up in too many rock, paper, scissors scenarios where it's Russian roulette, where it's quick draw. You throw this, I throw this. You throw that, I throw that. Because that is Terrence Crawford's strong suit. He is able to instinctively make reads where you break with your own pattern. And yes, Spence is more sophisticated than he's not a one-trick pony or anything close to it. You watch any of his fights, he's giving his opponents hell and a lot to think about. He mixes up the attack with both hands, and the way that he leverages and gets so much power in his shots because of his supreme balance. You watch that guy's balance. He could be bending at the knees and often still a little bit taller than his opponents. Another thing that he's going to have to deal with here, when he bends at the knees and he doesn't have the reach advantage, he's a little bit more vulnerable. But generally, he is so well balanced, like he was against Ugas, for instance. And Ugas is the only guy in recent memory who has had the reach advantage or a close reach to Errol Spence's. That's the only one. And you see what Spence had to do to make things right against Ugas. He had to kind of abandon the distance game, because I was watching him trying to outbox Ugas. But what is Ugas? Ugas is a sound counterpuncher. So in those first 3 or 4 rounds, it's like, I think Spence won that round, but it wasn't a Spence style fight. He wasn't seizing control. Spence is often in control by the 3rd, 4th round. So it wasn't until he started coming inside, and then he's got this brilliant inside attack to where, because he's so balanced, he takes an angle, works his probe hand, will throw the scooping left hook to the body or up top, often to the body. He starts mixing it up more, which can really mess you up if you think that he's going low and then he decides to go high. But on the heels of throwing that left to the body, he's already got his feet in position to then move and throw the right hand to the body, but his head is outside of where you are looking to throw your punches because he's taking angles. It's subtle. He's not taking angles like Gervonta Tank Davis, where you see what he's doing, or Floyd Mayweather. Well, Floyd Mayweather is sophisticated, obvious, and subtle, right? But you see some guys and you see, okay, he made a miss and then he countered with this. He made a miss, dipped over here, hit him with this. Canelo, perfect example. You see the angles Canelo's taking. With Spence, I feel like you have to look a little bit more closely because it looks basic. But when you see how he's adjusted his feet after throwing a withering body shot, he's already ready to do damage with either his other backhand, now it's his right hand because he stepped after throwing that punch, or he could do something with the lead hand. Now it's his left hand that would be playing the lead. It's a lot to think about, but the point is, he had to come inside on Ugas to make things right because, in my view, the distance game, the range game, wasn't working with Ugas. Well, I don't think that his range game is necessarily going to work with Terrence Crawford. So if plan A doesn't work and you're not able to kind of keep things at a simmering pace where you're throwing the bulk of the activity, you're landing the cleaner shots, you're dictating the terms of the exchange, and you are starting to back your opponent up. If that doesn't work, I don't see him successfully then taking a step back and fighting the back foot game like he did against Mikey Garcia. Before, I was thinking maybe he should do that. But the more I think about it, I don't see that working in the same way with Mikey, because again, the arms are just it's a whole different skill set and physical attributes that you have to deal with. So if Spence then makes it okay, we go on the inside and work that sophisticated leverage your shots, well balanced, come inside, mix up the attack high and low. Well, if he starts doing that against Terrence Crawford, one of two things could happen. Either it works and you could see the damage that he's doing and the effect that it's having on Crawford, because now you're seeing Crawford have to switch stances again, back up, smile, you know what I mean? Smile, move, unsuccessfully try to throw sneaky shots and Spence is still coming downhill, either that will happen or he's going to be taking clean shots, man. And look, say what you want about that 5th round moment against Yordenis Ugas. That worries me. The eye, to be honest with you, and a lot of people have given me stuff about it. They say, why don't you just let it go? He came in and he knocked out or stopped Yordenis Ugas after having the torn retina. That doesn't mean he didn't just have a torn retina. That doesn't mean that he can't get hit in the eye again. What happened when Kell Brook, who's had 2 broken orbitals, fought Terence Crawford, who knows what to target? And if you look at the shot that Terence Crawford hit Brook with, it didn't look like a pretty shot. It didn't even really look like an effective shot. It looked like a rewind that. What happened? Because I remember it was a competitive first couple rounds. I thought Kell Brook won the first 2 rounds. What happened? Terence Crawford switched to southpaw in the 3rd round, stopped him in the 4th round, and it was a lead right hand. It was strangely timed and strangely placed, but it was the last thing in that moment that Kell Brook expected to get hit by, and you saw Kell Brook act like he was, like he just stepped out of a washing machine, right? Or a dryer. Somebody spun him around 1,000 times, asked him to walk a straight line, and then he goes crashing into the ropes. It was very strange in the moment, but you see what he did. It didn't even look like a hard shot. But if the guy's walking into the shot, it doesn't need to be a hard shot. Well, what does Errol Spence like to do? He doesn't clumsily walk into shots, but he's moving forward. He's moving forward and he's throwing punches, and he's got good defense. It's not perfect defense, but imperfect defense when you're coming forward repeatedly, it just opens the door for Terence Crawford to do what he does best. And that's a concern to me. So to be honest with you, I've got more concern over Spence's eye than I do Crawford's age. 35, almost 36, turns 36 in September. But the eye bothers me. I think Spence might have a better chin than Crawford. We've seen Crawford rocked a couple of times. We usually see him answer back pretty devastatingly and pretty immediately often. But if Spence starts to come in, those are the 2 possibilities that I see playing out. I swear. I mean, Crawford is basically throwing ninja stars at you, and you don't even know, like, if he's throwing it something sidearm, if he's throwing it overhand, or if he's going to throw an uppercut. Like, it's possible that Spence, if he's having success, say he's up, 4 rounds to 2 after 6 rounds, he could still at any moment walk into a Crawford shot. And I've talked with some of you guys about this, and you say, okay, there's a possibility that might happen, but there's a bigger possibility that Spence does what he does effectively and doesn't get caught with the big shot and ends up either winning on the scorecards or stopping Crawford. If Spence stops Crawford, I mean, damn, that would be something too. Sean G. Yeah. Okay, I want to take a quick moment before we get right back into it. I'm going to address some of what you guys are saying. EK is in the house. Do you think the winner of this Crawford versus Spence fight will be the pound for pound number 1? Even if the fight is super close, controversial, disputed decision. Disputed makes it tough. If it was close, yeah. The thing is, look, some people already had Inoue like right there with them, right? I have Inoue number 5, or before this fight yesterday. I had him at number 5. The reason I had him at number 5 and not at 4, where I have Usyk, or 3, where I have Spence, Canelo 2, Crawford 1, that was mine. The reason I didn't have him higher was because, although he's beaten Nonito Donaire twice, Emmanuel Rodriguez, Payano, and it was a strength of schedule thing. That was really it. He's collected a lot of belts in a few weight classes now, but this was a super validating win. And the way that he did it, in certain moments in boxing history, somebody will have a performance that's such an outlier that it just makes the whole boxing world say, damn. And again, I said this at the top of the hour, makes them reevaluate what that fighter's ceiling is. This was so ceiling shattering that people, again, are talking, Inoue versus Tank Davis down the line, right? Well, this was a great performance. I had Stephen Fulton outside of my top 10, but Stephen Fulton being outside of the top 10, but I had him in my top 15. So a top 15 fighter who's at the top of his division, and then Inoue comes up to his fourth division. It's actually his fifth division, but just the fourth that he's won a title in. And he knocks off the best guy. So that shoots him to the top. The question is, now given Saturday's matchup, should the winner, if it's a close, controversial decision, be on top of the pound for pound rankings? I can't even say I have a clear answer on that. I'm leaning yes, because of overall strength of schedule. Because say Spence beats Crawford controversially, but gets the decision win. That would mean he would have beaten Ugas, he would have beaten Danny Garcia, Mikey Garcia, Lamont Peterson and Kell Brook before that, and Sean Porter. So there's beating the best guy in the division, and then there's more or less cleaning out the division. Now there's always going to be a new school of cats. Right now we've got Jerron Boots Ennis, and health permitting, we've got Virgil Ortiz Jr. I have strong questions about that. But then you've got Stanionis, questions about Conor Benn as well. I think that if Crawford beats Spence, Crawford is number one. If Spence beats Crawford, he might be number one, but I think it matters more how Spence beats Crawford if he's number one. If you've got more than half of the boxing world and people crying foul, crying robbery, it would be hard to put Spence at number one above the monster, given what the monster just did. But I would say that it's more than 50% likely that whoever wins this fight on Saturday is number one. Like, something would have to be pretty damning to their cause for them to not be number one after beating not the top 15 Stephen Fulton, but beating either Errol Spence or Terrence Crawford. I mean, Dimitri Bivol's in most people's top 10s right now because another great pound for pound type fighter came up and lost to him. Well, if Spence beats Crawford, undisputed at 140, lightweight champion, and then beat Errol Spence at welterweight, I would say, yeah, the person who wins on Saturday is likely the number one pound for pound fighter in the sport. But I'm not going to argue too hard against anybody who would still have Inoue up there. I mean, that was unbelievable. I was shocked. And it's funny. I said this in the beginning of the video that I did a reaction video just on the heels of that fight. Best performing video in this channel's history. And yesterday was the channel's best performing day in its history. It was, and again, I think that I scratched some algorithmic itch in terms of the timing of it and just the overall fanfare and the shock in the boxing world. I think it was just like a well-timed type of thing where it was like a lightning in a bottle scenario. But yeah, that shook up the boxing world. Certain performances do that. I think that Manny Pacquiao's performance over Oscar De La Hoya did that, where it's like, what can't Manny Pacquiao do? One of those types of effects. Let me get to some. Kaladin Kabata said, yeah, this fight happening is equivalent of a real life unicorn. Every now and then we'll get him. Canelo, Triple G. What was another? Floyd, Manny Pacquiao. Very, very late for that one. But every now and then we get the best fight that you could think of in boxing. Every now and then we get that. Often at times we don't. But I would say that if there is a clear best fight in boxing to be had, usually it ends up being arrived to, unless one of those guys loses when they're messing around and not fighting that guy that everybody wants them to fight. QT said, unpopular take, but I don't think Spence is the same. His land rate is down 4-5% post-car accident. That's an extra 20 to 30 missed punches of opportunity for Crawford. The opportunity for Crawford, I totally agree with. It's hard for me to pinpoint if he has shown any degradation after the accident. I kind of don't. I don't think he has. Not to say that he hasn't. I just don't see it because when he fought Danny Garcia is a pretty good defensive fighter. Like, nobody has stopped Danny Garcia. And like Terrence Crawford has a 100% knockout ratio, right? Since he's been at welterweight, all of his opponents have been stopped. I think I still think Danny Garcia could go the distance with Terrence Crawford. That's how much respect I have for Danny Garcia's boxing IQ, his toughness, his durability. So, and his defense, So that 4 to 5% drop, I think, is because Spence was fighting Danny Garcia and Yordenis Ugas, another good defensive fighter, and he wasn't fighting, a totally outsized Mikey Garcia or Sean Porter, who, it's amazing that Sean Porter didn't get knocked out earlier in his career, given how much he jumps in the pocket. But, Sean Porter is there, to give as good as he gets, right? He's there and he's throwing punches. Can you keep up with his pace and his aggression is the question. Or can you take a step back like Terrence Crawford did? I was surprised when I saw Spence versus Sean Porter. I was a little bit surprised at the lack of adjustments that, the great Errol Spence, and I didn't mean the air quotes, to demean, but how the great, who I see to be great, Errol Spence, did not make against Porter. It's almost like, what you see is what you get in the rounds 1 through 3 for the rest of the fight. Maybe if you guys could pinpoint some adjustments Spence made. I saw him fighting more or less a similar fight to what he was fighting throughout the fight. Sector Roadblocks, what's going on? Thanks for coming through. Jay Foreman, thank you for coming through. Yeah, Jay Foreman, heck yeah. Sector Roadblocks said, have you thought about doing live fight companions? It's funny. There were a few comments that I got asking me to do one for Spence-Crawford. I would love to, and I would love to get into doing them. I don't know. I mean, do you make your first one Spence-Crawford? I mean, here's the thing. Like, I like to party, right? I like to watch the fight, and I like to yell. Look, I am not nearly as measured as I am on these chats, and you'll see that as time continues, But I yell a lot, on fight night. Usually I don't have a voice by the end of the night. I'm talking a lot of trash with a lot of family and friends, and just having a good time watching the fight. In fact, a lot of the biggest fights I kind of see. I mean, I'm looking at the fight, but when you're also like listening, and I try to focus as much as I can, but I always do a rewatch. Like later on that night, everybody, when the world's asleep and stuff, basically, well, at least this side of the world's asleep, I'll watch it like at 2 a.m, 3 a.m, and see what really went down, and maybe even watch it the following morning. But long story short, I like watching the fights kind of in the moment and just sort of experiencing it. But to your suggestion or question, I would like to do fight companions. I think that would be pretty interesting. Look, I don't know how proficient I would be as because you're doing a couple things when you do fight companions. You are either doing play-by-play, which I miss Lampley's play-by-play. You know what I mean? I don't think I'd be the greatest play-by-play analyst. I could give it a shot. If anything, I would be better served. And maybe this is what a lot of other fight companions are. Like I like a Boxing Wave. I was actually logged into his channel while Fulton versus Inouye was going down, and so he'll comment, but he does some play-by-play, but he'll more so do what the analyst on the side of the play-by-play guy does, right? So the fight companion, the person is assuming that you're also watching the fight, and they're just adding a little color to it, adding a little insight, or just adding their thoughts, or trying to get your thoughts. So yeah, I would totally be open to that. I just don't know if Saturday's the night. Let's see. Billy Tucker, that's my brother, y'all. I think Spence wants to keep the fight in a third and short situation. Yeah, well put. I agree with that. Let's turn up the volume like a little bit, but not loud enough to where we're gonna get like disturbance calls. You know what I mean? Because again, Crawford is just not the one. And people say, people who are thinking that Spence is gonna win. And look, I am not knocking anybody who thinks that Spence is gonna win. I would put it at in my opinion, it's 52% to 48%, something like that. That's how I'm seeing this one. I'm thinking coin toss. I'm just thinking of which scenario I'm envisioning playing out. But the more I start to envision the fight, the more I feel like, yeah, I think that that's the right pick. Something tells me that that's the right pick. And it's the fact that you can't keep on coming in on Terence Crawford unless you're going to stop him. Unless you're going to stop him and just keep on badly hurting him. But as you do that, you better mind your P's and Q's. And Spence does mind his P's and Q's, but not perfectly. Not perfectly. And if anybody could kind of like sniff that out, it's Terence Crawford. And there are those who can sniff it out and hit you, like Maxie Hughes was against George Kambosos, but they don't do it like Spence does it. I mean, Mayweather, arguably the greatest fighter of all time, greatest boxer of all time, right? He didn't do it like Spence did that. And it's a trade-off. When you do it like Spence, like Crawford does it and did it. When you do it like Crawford does it, you're sacrificing some defense. You're almost willing to get hit by a few more shots so you could really hit the guy with what you really want to hit him with, rather than taking what the defense gives you, right? Maxie Hughes will take what the defense gives you. There are a lot of guys. Sandor Martin will take what the defense gives them. A lot of fighters, good fighters, great fighters, some great fighters will take what the defense gives you. Andre Ward to an extent, but he will also like turn up the volume. You know, look at his fight against Miguel Kessler, obviously Sergey Kovalev. But look, I think Crawford's going to get hit a good deal. It's just hard to picture because Spence will hit you, right? And he will hit you somewhat repeatedly. That's just what Spence does. But it's just hard for me to picture Terence Crawford getting hit again and again and not doing something drastic about it. And it's not a stylistic matchup that Sean Porter was throwing at Terence Crawford, or that he was throwing at Errol Spence, where every Sean Porter fight that you see, except for maybe the Kell Brook fight, it looks like a Sean Porter fight. It takes on the tone and the rhythm of a Sean Porter fight. I guess he kind of switched it up a little bit against Danny Garcia. But again, I think that that's a testament to Danny Garcia's boxing. But Sean Porter, it's really hard to make Sean Porter acquiesce into fighting your style of fight. But that's not what Spence is going to be bringing to Terence Crawford. And again, Spence, he gets kind of heavy on the front, where his neck is kind of out there. He will keep the high guard. Sometimes he'll get hit, and then it'll remind him to put that hand up, right? You see him get hit, smile, and then he starts like kind of coming in, and like you can see that he's focused, but then he starts keeping his hands up a bit more. But the thing is, like, you put your hands up here, you think that Crawford is out of places to hit you? No, that's the thing. I just feel like, as you hear in a lot of movies, it's too dangerous. It's just like you want to keep on coming in, and this guy is basically hitting you with nunchucks, and they could come here, up here. Like, he's gonna hit you with any one of those, and at any time, and it's not when you think he's about to open up. The way that he kind of lulled David Evanesian, and granted, it is David Evanesian, he lulled him into a right hook, left uppercut. Beautiful. Another argument that I've heard that was pro Spence was, look at who Terence Crawford has fought at welterweight. Who has Terence Crawford fought at welterweight that prepares him to beat Errol Spence? My answer to that, nobody. I'm not here to say that his resume at welterweight, even though he stopped everybody that he's fought at welterweight, I'm not saying that his resume automatically should lead you to thinking that he's going to beat Errol Spence. But his performances should make you at least give him strong consideration for beating Errol Spence. So it's not the resume, it's him. It's him. He could have been fighting A-level fighter, A- level fighters, B-, C+, but I've seen enough of him to know that Errol Spence needs to be very, very, very careful. So yeah, he doesn't have the resume. His resume is at 147 isn't Spence's resume at 147. Quite frankly, I don't think his career resume, even with the undisputed at 140 and the title at 135, I don't think Crawford's resume is as good as Spence's career-wise. And I'm sure some of you guys might disagree with that. I think that Spencer just fought more A-level fighters or A or near A-level fighters in their prime or near prime. But again, I think that Terrence Crawford and what we've seen from Crawford is why I think that Crawford's got a good shot at winning against Spence. Edward Espinoza, what's good? Thank you for coming through. I'm going to get to a couple of your, thank you for coming through. Heck yeah. Let's see. Jay Foreman said, I was kind of over this fight with all the back and forth. Now I'm pumped to see it. Yeah, that's the thing. I feel like a kid before Christmas. It feels a little bit surreal. And you know what the real deflator was? I mean, it wasn't Crawford versus Kell Brook. We knew that Crawford was with Top Rank, and we knew that it was going to be very tough for PBC and Top Rank to make that fight happen, given what they wanted, and just didn't seem like it was about to happen. What took the air out of the tire for me was when Crawford signed with BLK Prime for that one fight with Evanessi, and I'm like, that's it. I was done with it. I'm like, to me, that was a dark day in boxing history when that fight was signed and agreed to. And then I remember Crawford did the video where he's just sitting and talking to the people. Like, that was, I thought that the fight was done. And then they started like teasing, well, Errol Spence versus Keith Thurman. I mean, maybe 4 years ago that would have been cool. But, and again, we boxing fans are so used to not getting what we want in a lot of these scenarios that we're conditioned to take what we're given, to quote one of my favorite MCs, Slug from Atmosphere. But we've just been, we've been conditioned to be like, all right, yeah, I can get with that. But it's, even if it's not really what we want. So yeah, I feel you. I was maybe not over it, because if somebody were to say, hey, do you want it now? I'd be like, yeah. But I didn't think it was going to happen, just because I was looking at the age pretty much, and I was thinking, and still am concerned about the fact that Terrence Crawford is almost 36. I mean, he looked really good in his last fight, but I mean, the more you put it off, the more the more you're beating up on your tires. You know what I mean? Let's see. Shotgun left. Thank you for coming through. Jay Foreman said, Bud is at times reckless, but he just has so much power and so many tools that people end up losing the war. Look at how many times Bud got hit by an old Gamboa. I know that was a long time ago. Yeah, that's true. And if I'm not mistaken, Jay, you're picking Jesus. What's up, man? Jay, you're picking Spence, right? Flaming Sports Media, thank you. Just sub, thank you for that. And guys, if you haven't hit the like button, I always forget to do so when I enter chats, because you're always, you're looking and engaging with the chat. I always have to remind myself, click that X back up, like, and then hop back in. I make that mistake all the time. Yeah, thank you. Flaming Sports Media, Spider Monkey 304, what's going on? No. He said that the most likely the judges will ruin the fight anyways if it goes to the cards. Pick 3 fights that you'd like to see before the end of the year. I'll do 3 quick ones. Beterbiev versus Bivol. Gervonta Davis versus Devin Haney versus Prograis. I would rather Devin Haney, Teofimo Lopez, but I like Devin Haney versus Prograis. One more. Tyson Fury versus Usyk. That one's easy. Sector Roadblock said PBC is putting on the absolute best fight. And yeah, Canelo versus Jermell Charlo. That's also a crazy one. Crazy in good and bad ways, in my opinion. And I think Benjamin Tucker in the house agrees with the negative part of that fight, at least as it pertains to Jermell Charlo's chances. But let me see. I also want to, if this fight ends up somewhat even, rounds like 1 through 3, I'm expecting Spence to be winning like the first 2 out of 3 rounds. But will Spence be willing to get into 2 to 4 punch combinations? I was thinking about that. And he tends to do so when he really gets rolling. If you start seeing him opening up with 2 to 4 punch combinations, to me, it says 2 things. 1, he's having success, and 2, he's about to get hurt and maybe dropped. 2 to 4 punches against Crawford, it's not the thing to do. Again, like Billy Tucker said, third and short scenarios, just run the ball. I look at Errol Spence being like a run heavy offense. You know what I mean? Whereas, Terrence Crawford could put up 21 to 28 points in any given quarter. He might have a little famine, but he could also feast later on in the game and usually, air it out a bit. QT said, I won't be able to handle the judges stealing this fight from us. Any fight but this fight. Yeah, and that was a concern that I had mentioned. I want two things. I want the right guy to win, and I want it to be fair. I want it to be a clear winner and a fair winner. And I don't want the fight to be so technical. I don't expect it to be overly technical to where it lacks action. I guess the best way to put it is I don't want the fight to lack action. Because it's like, as a boxing fan, and I'm sure y'all can relate, you guys talk to casual boxing fans, non-casual boxing fans, non-boxing fans that are sports fans, and it's a very niche community, right? So when you've got a fight like Gervonta Davis versus Ryan Garcia, which did deliver, and you've got everybody else's eyes on the fight, it's like, okay, boxing, I'll give you a shot. Or people who are formerly fans of boxing who are coming back to boxing saying, okay, I'm going to give you another shot. You want that thing to deliver. I remember, what was it? I mean, there were certain Floyd fights late in his career where, Floyd won, but it was like, but it was so sort of one-sided. And when you had seen the first 3 to 4 rounds, you pretty much saw everything you needed to see. Like, the fight was over by round 4, basically. There's just a lot of instances where it's like, hey, non-boxing fans, come over, check this out. And then the fight ends up being like, not a snoozer, but unremarkable. I want this fight to be remarkable. I really want this fight to be remarkable, which, I mean, kind of ups the ante, because usually, action-packed fight means that someone got roughed up pretty bad and probably got dropped or something like that. Are you guys expecting any knockdowns in this fight? I could see either one of these guys getting dropped. I could see Crawford getting dropped because, I mean, we've seen Crawford get close to drop. I would say by more sudden punchers. I think that both Gamboa and Mean Machine are more sudden, like, boom, now you like, it went from nothing to something really quick. More sudden than Errol Spence. But I could see Crawford getting put on his butt. I could see, you already know, I could see Spence getting dropped. And again, that says nothing about any lack of quality in Spence as a fighter. I'm just saying that, again, Crawford just isn't the one. And the more that they play rock, paper, scissors, and it's like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, let's exchange. Okay, corral, shootout. That's where Terrence Crawford, in my estimation, will hurt Errol Spence. And I expect it to happen. Not with any great confidence, but greater than 50% for me. Greater than 50% confidence. Let's see. Edward Espinoza says he got Spence wearing out Crawford. He got Spence wearing out Crawford. He's got Spence 8-4 on the cards. Ja Apaya, thanks for coming through. Subriel Matias, for those of you that don't know, he said why. Ja Apaya said, why is nobody talking about Subriel? In this particular chat, it's just because it's all Spence-Crawford. But in general, it's because he's kind of like, he hasn't had any high-profile fights against named opponents. He's been fighting lesser-known but dangerous Eastern Europeans around the Baltic states. A couple of really tough fights. But Subriel Matias is one of the belt holders at 140. He just fought Hitamias Ponce. Very good fight. Very impressive win for Subriel Matias. I would like to see anybody at 140 try to fight Subriel Matias. I think Subriel Matias can beat at least one of those other big names at 140. I really do. That guy is unreal in terms of how much of a buzzsaw he is once the fight devolves into a pocket-centric fight. He's just he's terrorizing opponents, and he takes a lot of shots too. But he could take your shots better than you could take his. That type of scenario. Let's see. Spider Monkey 304 said, "What do you think will happen at heavyweight this year? I expect Tyson Fury to play with his food, and then maybe late stoppage against Francis Ngannou. I think that Alexander Usyk, although I look at Daniel Dubois as being maybe a trap fight and a very, very dangerous opponent, but I still am going Usyk, at least as far as I see it now. I'll do a video on that one, but I see that play out. I don't think that Fury and Usyk fight before the end of the year. Hope I'm wrong. I'm just looking at the schedules and I'm seeing that they fight like in, September, August. When's the last time, Fury fought like in 1 month and then fought like 3 months later? I just don't see the times, the schedules lining up. And I think that Zhang Zheli or Zheli Zhang beats Joe Joyce, probably beats Joe Joyce again, which is, it's like, damn, Joe Joyce, like, he was down to fight anybody while he was waiting for his turn. He was the mandatory for multiple heavyweight belts. He was just down to fight, Joseph Parker. Who stops Joseph Parker, right? But then he just picked the one wrong guy to fight, man. Like, he fought a guy bigger than him, who's a southpaw, who was able to just dot him up with that left hand. Let's see. I want to get to some of your guys' comments and questions. Let's see. Flaming Sports Media, he said, off topic, but what are your thoughts on Jojo Diaz? He suffered 3 losses in a row before finally getting a win. I look at him as being a B+ fighter, even in his prime. I remember when he challenged Gary Russell Jr. when he was still undefeated. Well, they were both undefeated. Jojo was undefeated too. Lost to Gary Russell Jr., but he started moving up in weight. I remember he won the belt against Tevin Farmer, who finally got back in the ring for the first time in like 3 years. But he beat Tevin Farmer. To me, that was his crowning moment. He became a 130-pound belt holder, but then he lost it on the scale in his very next fight before Rachmanov or Shavkat Rakhimov. And then they ended up fighting to a draw. So, and then he moved up to 135. To me, Jojo needs to be a 130 guy. He's very short, super short arms. Yes, he's kind of competitive at 135, but not really. If you consider, who did he beat at 135? He beat Javier Fortuna, who's a former 126-pound champion. So Jojo Diaz, good fighter, not a great fighter. He'll be at his best at 130 or even below. I don't think he'll ever get to 126 again. But if he could get to 130, man, go to 130. You got nothing for these guys at 135. Like, Devin Haney will beat you, and he'll kind of be nice about it. Others, not so much. And Jojo knows that. He fought William Zepeda, who probably hit him with 600 punches in that fight. It was crazy, the amount of punishment that Diaz took against William Zepeda. He had no business in here, in the ring with Zepeda. Shotgun left sees it going 2 ways: Bud early stoppage or Spence late stoppage. So check it out. I want to get to a couple more questions, and I want to ask you guys a question. Ja Apaya, what do you make of Naya Inoue versus Robeisy Ramirez? Well, first of all, I think that Inoue will beat Marlon Tapales if they fight to unify the division. Robeisy Ramirez, I think Inoue beats Ramirez. Ramirez is really crafty, and he hits hard. He hits pretty hard. But I would go with the Monster. You know what fight I really wish I could see? The Monster Inoue at 126. If he goes to 126 against Gary Russell Jr. or against Emmanuel Navarrete. Something tells me he takes Navarrete to school and hurts him, but I don't know, man. Navarrete is absolute hell, but look, I wish Navarrete was still at 126. He just went up to 130. He beat Liam Wilson for a vacant belt there. So he's a champion, I guess, right? But he was so good at 126 and so good at 122. I just don't think he's going to be at his best at 130. You start seeing Navarrete with a little pudge around his belly. It's like, that's not Navarrete. Navarrete was at string bean, super skinny, with just unreal long arms for the division. Put it like this: Navarrete's reach is like Terrence Crawford's reach. Seriously, I'm not making this up. He's got the reach of Terrence Crawford, only he was at 122 and 126. but now he's at 130, so he's got like a little bit, he's a little softer around the belly area. I don't like it. He got hurt badly. I thought he was going to get knocked out against Liam Wilson. You saw how badly he got dropped. But to answer your question, I think I would lean Inoue, but we'll see. I mean, who knows? Maybe Inoue caught lightning in a bottle against Stephen Fulton, and he struggles with Marlon Tapales. We'll see. Give me 1 second. Just gonna hydrate. But let me ask you a question in the meantime. And some of you guys have already answered. If you have answered, please answer again. Who are you taking between Spence-Crawford and how? Jay Foreman said that he's almost rooting for Ngannou to clip and end Fury. You know what? I feel you. Like, that would be a travesty for boxing, but it would also be you know what? Serves you right, man. Serves you right. I mean, he's getting paid either way, but it's like, you disrespect the game, let the game disrespect you. Like, one of those things. I'm really upset that Usyk versus Fury is not happening. Or at least not happening now. Spider Monkey 304 said, "Who's your favorite boxing commentator?" Interesting. And it doesn't have to be. Does it have to be the play-by-play guy? Or can it be, can it be like the analyst? I'm a big Max Kellerman fan. It's a shame ESPN let him and Andre Ward go. To me, that lessens the broadcast for me. I mean, no knock to Bradley, Tessitore, Kriegel. And, I always thought it was a little different. It was different that they had two fighters. Usually it goes, you've got the play-by-play guy, you've got the non-former boxing analyst, the Larry Merchant, or sometimes the trainer, right? So Larry Merchant, Emmanuel Stewart, the late, great Emmanuel Stewart, Max Kellerman, and so forth. And then you've got the fighter, George Foreman back in the day. Lennox Lewis did it for a while. Roy Jones Jr. did it. And then obviously Andre Ward and others. But my favorite, I always like Max Kellerman's commentary. In terms of my favorite play-by-play guy, Jim Lampley. It's just because, I grew up on HBO boxing. You know what I mean? I grew up on Showtime boxing too, but HBO, there was something about that broadcast. It just looked official. It just looked like you are watching the best that boxing has to offer. I don't know if it was like the kind of like the golden trimmings around, like when they would show you like this fighter and that little gold, that gold surrounding area. Everything was just so standardized. And, even the entrance music, I remember like, a TV show could be going off at the time, say it's HBO's True Blood, Boardwalk Empire, whatever show was on at the time. Treem, remember Treem, Treme? I never watched that one. It would always be on. I just wasn't watching it. And then what was that? Whatever show would be on, Sopranos, it would go off and you just knew what time it was. They would show like the preview and then you would start seeing the intro, the HBO intro, and you're just like, you knew it was on. It just built excitement. So there was just some magic about the HBO broadcast. So, and Lampley he just had a great voice too. But also, to me, they're all good. Like Tessitore is good. Mauro Ranallo's good. They're all good. But Lampley seemed to just have like a fluidity to his, like, to what he was saying, to where he would say like the quickest, most sensible, usually, everybody disagreed with Lampley at some point or another. But everything that he would say would just be so like, that was like the perfect thing that needed to be said right in that moment. You know what I mean? Like, he was very good at that. And he could also play very well off of Merchant or Emmanuel Stewart or George Foreman. And he could challenge them without it getting awkward. I find myself listening to all kinds of awkward moments between Chris Mannix and Sergio Mora. I know they're friends. And if you listen to the Mannix boxing podcast, they mess with each other all the time. But even with like Bradley and Tessitore and Kriegel, a whole bunch of just like weird, awkward moments where it's like, I don't want to be watching the fight and thinking, do these guys not like each other? And I know that Kriegel has a lot of respect for Bradley. Like when Bradley made the Hall of Fame, Kriegel told a story and was just in tears over Bradley and his fight with Provodnikov. So I know that they have admiration, but just listening to the broadcast, you're like, like that didn't sound smooth, you know? So, yeah, HBO will give you some of that, but it would usually not involve Lampley, right? Lampley would be like the mediator almost and just be doing his play-by-play, but you would get a lot of Foreman and Merchant going at it and just taking like little sneaky shots at each other, and then just kind of like one-upping each other, and kind of like they were always kind of ribbing each other. Jay Foreman said it got pretty awkward between George Foreman and Lampley in that Barrera versus Hamed fight. But yeah, live television, anything could happen. Let's see. Okay, so we have Ja Apaya said Bud, late stoppage, Spider Monkey 304, Bud in 7. And you know, Bud Crawford is the slight betting favorite. You know, like I was wondering how that was going to play out. But you know, Bud was one of these fighters where I didn't notice how great he was until he was at 147. I knew he was really good, but he wasn't jumping off the page. And maybe it's because, you know, when I would see him at lightweight, he didn't have like lightning fast hands, and he didn't appear to have devastating power. It's weird. Like Ricky Burns went the distance with him. Breedis Prescott went the distance with him. A lot of guys at lightweight a few guys at lightweight were going the distance with him. And then he started to like knock most of his opponents out at 140. Victor Postal was the last guy to go the distance. Since then, he's been finishing everybody. But, you know, I'm like, I see that Crawford's good, and I think that he's going to be a champion. I think he's going to be in the mix. I did not see special. Whereas with Spence, I thought that there was a strong likelihood that he could be special. So with Crawford, it was like a fight by fight growing appreciation that built with the way that I saw Crawford in his game. But even during that growth, I would always see like ESPN like hyping him and putting him in like in the top 3 pound for pound. And I like Bud. I liked Bud the whole time. And I'm like, but damn, really? Like top 3? I didn't see him as being as good as they were kind of crediting him with being as early as they were doing it. Like around the same time Vasily Lomachenko first started to hit the top of the pound for pound, they were putting Bud in there pretty shortly thereafter. Let's see. QT said, what do you want to see from Boots? I think he should move up to 154 now. No real competition for him at 147. Do you not think that the winner of this or the loser of this has any interest in fighting Boots? Are you saying that Spence and Crawford are off the table? I don't expect Keith Thurman to fight Boots Ennis. So he could go to 154, and there are a lot of guys like PBC has the lion's share of the elite talent at 154. So that is a possibility. But you know, if he could stay at 147, I would first say earn your belts at 147. Like handle that first, right? In the words of Jay-Z, finish your breakfast. Like don't leave if you don't have to. Like Virgil Ortiz, it looks like he's gonna have to leave. If he's going to even be able to continue a career, he'll have to leave 147, it sounds like. But I'm sure that he would have loved to have had a title opportunity before leaving a division where he was clearly scary and dangerous. It's just a shame that the top of the division had been held up for so long, kind of leaving these other seemingly elite fighters without a title opportunity. There are not too many divisions that do that, but you know the ones that do that. You know, heavyweight is one of them. QT has Crawford by stoppage in under 10, but I don't know what will be next for Bud. Canelo robbed him of the Jermell fight. Yeah, Bud was angling at Jermell because I think Bud wanted to clean up Derrick James's stable, which would have been crazy. That would have been crazy if he actually like beat Spence and attempted to do that by going up and fighting Jermell. That would have been like truly historic. That to me would have outdone what Canelo was able to do going to 168 and beating Callum Smith, Billy Joe Saunders, and Caleb Plant for those titles, and Avni Yildirim. Let's see. I think I had missed a couple of the questions, but I want to make sure that I get to as many as I can. boxing memory. Spider Monkey 304. What's your favorite boxing memory? I was in high school when Trinidad De La Hoya. Such an exciting moment. Yeah, that was one of my favorite. One of my absolute favorites was when Shane beat Oscar. Even though I felt bad that Oscar didn't get the win against Tito. Oscar deserved the win against Tito, but I feel like the way that I look at fights, regardless of who the fighter is, like if it's I was even doing it for Spence. There have been fights where I pulled against Spence. There have been fights that I pulled against Crawford, but I'm one of these like I find myself pulling for a lot of underdogs. Now, I wouldn't bet on the underdog, and like if I'm doing a preview, I'm going to tell you, hey, if I think the favorite's going to win, I think the favorite's going to win. But when somebody is at the esteem level of De La Hoya, I'm looking at their competition like, come on, Chavez, get him, old man, or come on, Ike Corte. But with Mosley excited me when I first started seeing him fight because of the electrifying hand speed and the power. And so I'm thinking like, man, he's really got a shot at beating Oscar. And they had a history at the amateur level. So seeing that fight play out and seeing Mosley get his hand raised, that one was pretty memorable for me. But there are others. Oh, memorable in all the wrong ways. Roy Jones Jr. getting knocked out. I don't even know which was worse, Tarver or Glenn Johnson. But those were memorable for all the wrong reasons. That was pretty devastating. And then Roy Jones obviously going up and beating John Ruiz. That was a big one. And the reason I've got the water and stuff, I've been kind of battling a cold for the last couple of days. So, but I couldn't resist doing this live. I'm like, no, it's Spence-Crawford week. We doing this. Let's see. And there are some other, there's probably a best memory that's just not coming to mind right now. Floyd Mayweather's got a couple great memories. I've got a couple great memories. But I mean, the ones that jump out that are like, oh my God, was like Manny Pacquiao getting knocked out by Marquez in their fourth fight. I mean, how you'll never forget that moment. Like I thought the people in the room were gonna I thought the roof was gonna blow off the house. That was like a, oh my God, what just happened moment. Just like, in the UFC, Anderson Silva getting knocked out by Chris Weidman. That was mind blowing. The bad ones tend to stick out and stay with you with me for some reason. But there are some good ones that I'm forgetting to mention. So we're gonna wrap this up in a sec, but I want to get to a few more questions and just kind of give some just kind of like a last little thought on Spence-Crawford, and just again, and I said this a little bit earlier, just appreciate the anticipation, because who knows, the fight itself might end up playing out to be a dud, right? So appreciate these anticipatory days leading into Saturday. Because you don't get that back. And who knows when the next time we will get a fight like this, a generational fight like this. We'll get a lot of good fights. We'll get some great fights. But when it's this great fighter you've been tracking this whole time against this other great fighter you've been tracking this whole time, and they've passed all their tests with flying colors all the way through, and then they meet, you really can't ask for anything more. So who knows what the fight, is going to result in, but just remember and feel how excited you are about the fight. I feel like that's so important. Yeah. Hey, Free Range Prisoner, what's going on? Love that HBO theme song back in the day. Yeah, it's still in my head. Let's see. Fight for Life. Thank you for coming through. Spence has to win within the first 4 rounds. Spence ain't winning this in the first 4 rounds. Either by knocking Crawford out or hurting him beyond recovery. If not, he gets knocked out by round 9. But Spence can be a slow cooker, an effective slow cooker too. You know what I mean? Like, I think that there is a strong possibility that Spence beats up Crawford worse than Crawford beats him up and wins a decision. I find the path to a stoppage a little bit tougher, but I don't know, because I don't see Bud running. Bud stands his ground, right? I mean, he'll take a step back, but usually when he's taking a step back, it's to it's to set the table, right? It's not like he's trying to buy time. He's not moving around the perimeter of the ring like that. So something's got to give here. Something's got to give. And it's weird because both of these guys are so damn good that, you know, it really is a coin flip. And, you know, if it plays out a certain way and somebody has a demonstrative victory, sure, you're going to get a lot of us going out saying, oh, of course it makes sense that such and such happened. And then we start, you know, reverse engineering how that happened. And then it's like, how could I miss that? How could I have missed that? That happens sometimes. You know, well, case in point, Canelo versus Dimitri Bivol. People forget Canelo was like almost a 5-1 favorite, 4-1, 5-1 favorite against Bivol. And then it's like, well, yeah, Bivol was too big for Canelo. Well, I mean, like, that's not what anybody was saying going into the fight. And, you know, and reasonably so. Like, I picked Canelo to win. I picked him to win like a 115, 113-ish type of decision. But at that time, people thought that not only was Canelo going to beat Bivol, but then he was going to like set his sights on Better Beef and become undisputed at light heavyweight. That's how big the glow around Canelo was after what he did at 168. Let's see. Jay Foreman. Yeah, my bad. Yeah, you were saying Foreman and Lampley at first, but then you had said, no, you meant Merchant, not Lampley. So George Foreman and Merchant in that Barrera Naseem Hamed fight. You know, just because you said that, I'm gonna rewatch that fight tonight. Do you guys rewatch a lot of fights? I rewatch fights all the time, and it could be random ones too. It doesn't have to be like two blue chippers or like, you know, it doesn't have to be one of the great fights in the pantheon of boxing history. It could just be like random. Like I watched Victor Ortiz versus Marcos Maidana just because I wanted to see the way that Victor Ortiz kind of seemingly quit in the middle rounds when they were trading knockdowns, and then gave that interview where he's like, hey, you know, like my faculties, like, I'm not the type, I'm not going to fall on my sword. You know, this isn't worth it, basically, is what Victor Ortiz said. But I'll watch so many of those, you know, old fights. By the way, shame on Showtime for not making their archive available. DAZN makes their fights available. ESPN makes at least a lot of their fights available. Why is Showtime so damn stingy with what they're giving you access to? It could be a fight that happened a month ago, and I'm paying for Showtime every month, and I can't see a fight that happened 3 months ago. I swear, you go into the Showtime archive, they might have like 4-5 fights for you. Like, that's it. Like so maybe 6 or 7. It's slim pickings in terms of what you have access to through the Showtime app. And yeah, that's just not cool. And I wish there was a way of kind of you know, sounding that alarm. I've said a couple things on Twitter, but I need one of those like little matches to catch fire, and then, you know, so it can make its way to Showtime, or else I'm going to start having to just at Showtime. What the hell, Showtime? Let's see. ML, thanks for coming through. He said, yeah, I think Crawford makes it into the later rounds. Let's see. Shotgun left. See, Dave Eister. Or either Aister or Eister. Crawford by stoppage. Shotgun left says, see Spence rocking Crawford with the right hook, and then barraging with combinations, stopping Bud on the ropes. That could happen. Crawford does get caught, and I mean, when Spence, it's like the proverbial rolling downhill. You get that feel when Spence starts picking up on the momentum. And yeah, Crawford could be a victim of that. I just think that he's going to catch him with something sharp, and there's going to be one quick draw shootout too many for Spence. It's going to be very dramatic if we do see Spence kind of get shaky legged. I just have so much respect for Spence, Crawford, their corners, their teams. Like, I mean, their trainers, right? Like Derek James. When has there been a hotter trainer? Okay, there was Eddie Reynoso and the 5 that he had at that one time, but Derek James is stable right now. It's pretty crazy. I don't even know if it's going to work out for half those guys. David Easter said, Stanionis says he wants to fight Boots without a tune-up. Story is on Boxing Scene. Yeah, Stanionis is about it. I feel really bad for Stanionis. Like, he was really gearing up for that Virgil Ortiz fight like 2 or 3 times, because the first time Stanionis had to pull out for his appendectomy. But that fight was canceled 3 different times. Stanionis hasn't fought since beating Ruslan Butayev or Radzab Butayev on the Spence versus Ugas undercard. Stanionis hasn't fought since that. Impressive win too. Turkey became a boxing fan back in 2020. Love the sport, man. Heck yeah. You know what I love? I love it when the sport loves us back. ML, Oscar versus Mosley was close. Could have gone either way. Yeah, that was a close fight. And you know what? The second fight, at least when I watched it the first time, I thought Oscar kind of got, maybe not robbed, but I thought that he edged it against Mosley in the rematch. And I was pulling for Mosley, and I thought Oscar edged the rematch. And Mosley at the time was messing around with Victor Conti, right? That's around the time where he got tested for a banned substance. Jay Foreman, the Morales versus Pacquiao 1 and Marquez versus Pacquiao 4 were memorable for you. Yeah, you'll never forget Marquez Pacquiao 4. Morales Pacquiao 1 was memorable for me, but Morales versus Pacquiao 2, that was crazy as well. That fight was maniacal. And then the third fight, well, the first fight, didn't Pacquiao receive like a really bad headbutt too? That was just a kind of a bloodbath, right? And Pacquiao got roughed up a bit. And then by the third fight, Morales had taken so much punishment and damage that he was kind of a shell of himself entering the third fight with Pacquiao. David Eister says, I think the judges that were appointed to Spence-Crawford suck. One of these 3 judges gave a draw in the Maxie Hughes or George Kambosos versus Maxie Hughes fight. Do I have that right? I think that that's the case. So it's not the one who had Kambosos winning 9 rounds to 3, which is crazy. But the judge that gave it a draw, which that wasn't the worst call. I thought Hughes won, but Franco H, what's going on? Greetings. Thanks for coming through. You think Spence will be too big for Crawford? I got Spence. The thing about Spence is that I think that the style that will be the most effective for him against Crawford is also, and I mean the style that he employed against Ugas, who's the only guy who had a comparable reach to Spence. So again, Spence fought like Danny Garcia, Mikey Garcia, both of them pretty short arms. Sean Porter, totally different style. Short arms, but different style. Ugas is the only one who had the long reach, like 73 inches. Crawford is 74 inches, Spence 72 inches. So Spence had the luxury of being able to impose himself by working that lead probe hand, changing levels, and doing those Spence-like things, controlling the fight largely with that lead right hand. I don't think he's going to have that luxury against Terrence Crawford, and he's not going to be able to box him from distance in the way that he was able to jab and continuously jab the short-armed Mikey Garcia. So what happened after the first few rounds with him and Ugas? Again, I thought Ugas fought him very competitively in the first 4 or 5 rounds. And don't forget that moment in the 5th round. Spence said he thought that his partials, his teeth, got knocked out on that Showtime All Access show, and that he was looking for his teeth. And it did look like he was looking down for something, but I also think Spence got hurt in that moment. I've heard people think that, say that they thought that he was reacting to like getting hit in the eye or something like that, which also look out for, because don't think that Crawford won't target the eye. And you know which eye it is too. It's the one that he's got the bandage on in the pic that's on Google, like you've seen him with the eye covered up. But let's see. Yeah, I agree. ML 2023 is a great year for boxing. But what I was saying is Spence, to be the most effective and to impose the most punishment on Crawford is also going to give Crawford those opportunities to do what Crawford does best. So that's why the styles are so interesting here, because I think that Spence has to come forward and has to be that patient hunter who's working the body and getting all that leverage into those scooping shots to beat Crawford. But Crawford reacting to those moments is how Crawford could beat Spence. So all roads lead to, like, something's got to give. And again, it's a coin toss, but I'm still going Crawford late stoppage, even giving up the little bit of size, because he's not giving up the reach. And I wonder what the reach is going to look like. Like, if we see if we see Spence trying to establish a jab and Crawford's able to counter on top of that, which I don't necessarily expect him to, like he wasn't able to like just counter on top of like Kell Brook's jab, like in the early rounds. Kell Brook looked faster than Crawford early, but imagine if Spence is trying to get his jab going and Crawford is able to somewhat stand his ground and is able to counter that. That would be bad news for Errol Spence. There's just so many different possibilities in terms of how this could potentially play out. So we're going to wrap this up in a second. Sub-Swoles, great vibes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, one nation under a groove right here. ML, you doubt it will be a dud. Yeah, I'm hoping it will. I'm hoping it won't be a dud. So let me catch up with you. I think what happened is my screen got stuck, so I'm like reacting to like comments from like 5-10 minutes ago. You're right, but unless Jay Foreman said you're right, but unless Spence completely dominates, I don't think it'll be a dud. Yeah, it's hard to picture this one being a dud. It really is stylistically. Turkey has said, I don't think Bivol was too big for Canelo. I actually think Canelo would still be better BF. Yeah, I think Bivol was too. I think Bivol was too Bivol for Canelo. I think it had as much to do with the movement as it had to do with the size. If not as much, close. QT, yeah, shame on Showtime for only 2 All Access shows. Remember the 24/7s on HBO and then All Access on Showtime when Floyd. That was a big like moment in boxing, right? That kind of shifted the power from HBO to Showtime. I almost think that Floyd leaving HBO played into HBO shutting down its boxing operations, sadly. But with the 24/7s, you got 4 episodes and an epilogue. All Access, Showtime for the biggest fight in the generation, or at least the best fight matchup of the generation, has 2 episodes, short episodes too. And then an epilogue days after the fight, that's bogus. To me, that says more about the current state of the boxing economy than anything else. That to me is more sad than it is infuriating. I'm like, damn. I'm like looking at them like, hey, is everything okay over there? You know, that's how I'm looking at that. Let's see. But yeah, I want to thank you guys for coming in to the live chat and for participating heavily. I always love reading your thoughts, whether it's in the comments or in the live chats here. And yeah, like again, it's like Billy Tucker said, it is Christmas in July. This is almost it's one of those like, okay, pinch yourself. Like, and a lot of people still say I got to see them in the ring. You know what I mean? For me to believe that it's gonna take place. So just knock on wood. We hopefully it's all smooth sailing. You know, they have the final press conference tomorrow, the weigh-in on Friday, and then the fight on Saturday. That's how it's going down, right? I'm going Crawford, late stoppage. I don't want this to end in controversy. I don't want this to end in robbery. I don't want this to be an uneventful, non-action-packed fight. And I don't want a fighter to get memed. Like, I'm not a huge fan of meme culture. I don't know if you could tell by the channel. I need to actually do more things that are meme-like, I think. Not in my previews or anything, but it would be like its own thing, like 1 minute shorts or something, something different. But what I mean by that is, I remember when Pacquiao got knocked out and there was like that clip of him face down going viral. I mean, I laughed, you know what I mean? But I didn't like it at the same time. And then you started seeing that was kind of like the most ubiquitous like image of Pacquiao, right? Mike Rhyme, thanks for coming through. But yeah, because then a whole bunch of like, if boxing fans, like hardcore boxing fans, want to clown fighters and talk trash and this and that, that's cool. But then like I almost feel protective of boxing and of the boxing community and of the fighters when it comes to everybody else and the reputations, of the fighters and how the sport is viewed. And so, sure, it's good in terms of just getting eyeballs on anything boxing related. Lord knows ESPN barely has any interest in boxing. If you look, you have to go searching and digging to see where's the top ranked card. Now it could be like live on, and you still got to scroll down, scroll across. There it is. You know what I mean? So ESPN, Disney, they don't care. But so any bit of exposure, you could argue, is good exposure. But when the ubiquitous and the most viewed image of any fighter in the sport for like a week is, I don't know, like Deontay Wilder knocked half unconscious with his arm outside of the ring because he hung in there with Tyson Fury, dropped him twice, got dropped a few times, fought the guy 3 times. Like, I just feel like these guys deserve more than to be more than to just be the butt of jokes. You know what I mean? Like, that's just how I feel. And I get that there are differing opinions on this, and I might be making too much of it, but that's how I see it. And I'm just saying that for Spence-Crawford, I hope that this isn't like a memeable moment for the wrong reasons. I hope that nobody gets shat on, for lack of a better term. But yeah, I'm just happy that the fight's taking place. Yeah, Jay Foreman said, yeah, that was straight disrespectful to Pac. I laughed too. I laughed too, though. Not gonna lie. But yeah, thank you, Jay Foreman, for coming through. Shotgun Left, thanks for coming through. Mike Rhyme, QT, Turkia, David Eister. And if you want to put your pronunciation so I know for next time, please do. Like the video, guys, if you haven't. Let's see, Billy Tucker, thanks for coming through. Benjamin Tucker, I knew you came through. Sup Swoles, holding it down on the admin. Thank you. Yeah, you know, if these videos over the past several months have looked better than the videos before that, Sup Swoles, he's family, and yeah, a lot of thought, effort, and work went into this. Like, I mean, he built the computer that I'm using right now. ML, thank you for coming through. Franco H, thank you for coming through. Yeah. So yeah. Look, I'm gonna do one more video on Spence-Crawford. It's probably gonna be like the day before. I might do one just after the weigh-in. Just kind of giving my takeaways. Did any fighter like look drained? Am I worried about anything or thinking about anything that I did not consider before? I'm gonna do one of those. Aside from that, y'all, enjoy the fight. Enjoy the fight, and thank you once again for coming through. I've got the preview. If you want to see the full Spence versus Crawford preview, that's up right now. And again, thank you for everybody who checked out the Inoue versus Fulton reaction yesterday. That's the channel's best performing video to date. It went crazy. I was like, whoa, I thought something happened. Like, I thought something went wrong. It was just so unusually like, again, I think that, you know, the timing had a lot to do with it. And I think I'm going to be more cognizant, you know, not waiting a day and a half after the fight or even a day, but trying to get a reaction or some post-fight analysis within a day of the fight. I think, you know, could go a long way. But yeah, thank you guys once again for coming through. I'm Woog. Peace.